Well, I'd like to welcome Congresswoman Michele Bachmann of Minnesota, a good fiscal conservative, and we've had a great discussion about the bailout bill, the financial services reform bill. And one thing that we talked about early on that I'd love for you to talk about is how is this going to affect the average American? I mean, this bill as a whole, it has a dramatic effect on our economy, but people listening in want to know, how's it going to affect me?
Well, it's a disaster, number one, bottom line, because it really gives the federal government the authority to decide who will get credit in the United States and who won't. Why is that the government's business? Why should they be allowed to decide if you're politically connected well enough or not, if you get credit? That's really a bad idea. The other thing that I think we have seen is, I think every day we are happier and happier that we took the vote against the bailout, the big $700 billion TARP bailout. I think every day we feel like we were proved a little bit more right every day. But unfortunately, this bill would give permanent bailout authority to the President of the United States. And what's unique about this bill is that the bill bypasses Congress. No longer would the President have the messy obligation to come and ask members of Congress, what do we think about bailouts? The President on his own could issue any bailout at any time in any amount. Again, to give the executive the authority of the purse, that's contrary to the Constitution. The Constitution gives the authority to the people's representatives. We were elected for a 2-year term. There's a reason why the founders wanted the House of Representatives elected for 2-year terms, because we control the money, and the people need to be able to vote us out of office if we're spending too much money. So we want people to have that opportunity to go to the ballot box and vote us out. If you're the president, have the power of the purse, which the Constitution does not give that authority to the president, then he can go ahead and spend money, and it takes 4 years for the people to make that change.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I think I'd like to expand on it a little bit. I mean, for example, we're talking about the fact that your average American, they're going to be on the hook for a lot of this. And when you look back to the so-called troubled assets relief program,
they're on the hook for all of it. Government has no money. It's only the people's money. So we're on the hook for all of it.
The People's Republic of China's money.
That's right. That's right.
Now, when the Department of Treasury came to Congress to get the so-called troubled assets relief program, they came with a 3-page bill. Congress had its say and actually drafted up legislation. And then we saw what happened. The Department of Treasury then went off and didn't buy any troubled assets. They went and did what they wanted to do and just infused money into the banks.
Isn't that funny how those blank checks work that way?
And that's exactly what we're talking about now. Why would we trust the federal government with this authority without having to go to Congress before they try and bail out banks?
Well, exactly. That's why every piece of legislation that Congress passes should have a sunset clause, so that there is an expected date of expiration. We don't have this with this new bailout that's coming forth. And that's why I think people overwhelmingly, when they hear that this is a continuous bailout bill, people say, been there, done that, no thanks, we don't want this bill. But of course, the way that the administration has been parlaying this bill is that it's somehow a bill to kind of tie Wall Street up in knots. People are for that. But when they find out that Wall Street wants this bill, that the head of Goldman Sachs wants us to pass this financial reform bill, that's kind of all we need to know. Because again, this $700 billion bailout isn't the first time that Congress did a bailout. All through the Clinton era, there was bailout of Wall Street friends after bailout of Wall Street friends. And that's when Wall Street learned that they could just throw the dice and take the profits themselves, but then put the losses on the backs of taxpayers. That's again what this bill would do. And again, it's why we reject this bill out of hand. And let's remember really what this is. This has a lot in common with Italy in the 1930s and the way Italy dealt with economics. It is still continues private ownership of business, but it's government control. So government control of the private business while it's private ownership. That's still, at the end of the day, the federal government virtually having the say over private business. We lose freedom, we lose economic competitiveness, and don't forget, Italy is in tough shape now financially, and that's not where we want the United States.
Now, this bill, you look at the legislation, it establishes permanent bailout authority for Wall Street. It hurts your average taxpayer, puts them on the hook for the losses of Wall Street, does nothing about Fannie and Freddie. It hurts small business. Take a step back. What does this do for the idea of capitalism in our country?
Capitalism is under attack. Free markets are under attack. And I think Steve and I have talked about this quite a bit. The most stunning story of the last 18 months is that 18 months ago, 100% of the private economy was private. Then we had the $700 billion bailout. That slush fund was used by the federal government for one reason, and the purpose was this: they bought one private industry after another out of that. They purchased AIG. They purchased the largest banks in the United States, Citibank, Bank of America. They purchased the largest car companies in America, GM, Chrysler. They purchased Fannie and Freddie. They're now nationalized so that over 50% of all private mortgages are now owned by the federal government. If you want to buy a home today, 9 times out of 10, you've got to go to the federal government to get your loan today. They own the student loan industry and now health care. So in 18 months' time, we've gone from 100% of the private economy private to 51% of the economy or more is owned or controlled directly by the federal government. Think of it. How can we, with a straight face, even say we're a free market economy anymore? And then, if this bill goes through, this financial services bill will give the federal government direct control over the financial services industry, which some people have estimated at 15% more of the economy. Or if cap and trade goes through, which is effectively a national energy tax, that would give the federal government another 8% of the private economy they're in charge of. This is the story of the last 18 months, and it's why our economy can't grow right now. But I think it's a very deliberate move by this administration to centralize power and to have government own or control the means of production. That's for anti-free market.
I no longer have faith that the president gives his word seriously at all. And I think our watchword needs to be this: repeal. We have to look at repeal. We'll never get our country back if we're not willing to make the hard decisions and go right down the line, win a majority back in November, and start down the line of repeal. And if we can't get it repealed without a veto from President Obama, then we shut off all funding that implements any of these activist things that are there. And I think Michelle agrees with me.
Oh, absolutely. The health bill is the #1 bill that we have to repeal. But when the Democrats came in, they had an omnibus spending bill. And omnibus means big fat. That's what it was. Big, huge, fat spending bills. 40 years of dreams of all these liberal projects, and they put it into place. But what we need is an omnibus repeal bill. So all of the measures that have been passed over the year that have stifled small business and stifled job growth, we get a massive repeal bill, and we just in one fell swoop do away with it and have the guts to do with it. I give the Obama administration, Pelosi and Reid, credit. They had the guts to do what they wanted to implement. Now, we see it destroying the country, but they at least have the guts to do it. Now, conservatives have to have the guts to do the repeal bill. I was all over my district yesterday. I was in 4 different cities. I held 4 job forums, 90 minutes each across the district, all for the purpose of trying to figure out how can we have more job creation in the small businesses in the private sector. And they talked about transparency. You know what they were angry about? The fact that the members of Congress didn't even have time to read the bills, and they didn't have time to read the bills. Here we're talking about nationalizing more and more of the economy, and the people can't even read the bills. Yeah. I think that really disgusts them about what President Obama and Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid did. Because they did this under the dark of night, and they passed these bills, they wrote them, they let lobbyists write these bills, special interests write the bills, so we couldn't even read them. It was impossible for anyone to read these bills. And I will guarantee you, not one senator read that health care bill before they voted on it. And it isn't because we're too stupid or too lazy to read these bills. We physically couldn't because we're not even given the time to do it.
Well, thank you, Congressman Steve King. Congresswoman Michele Bachmann, thank you so much for coming in, talking about this issue. Look forward to having you in to talk about other issues as they come up before Congress.
We do, too. Thanks,
Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Great. This event was brought to you by Ensuring Liberty, an organization that stands for less government, fiscal responsibility, lower taxes, national security, and states' rights. Please click on the Join Now button to join this organization and take that anger that people are feeling out there right now and put it right into action. Thank you so much.